Where the road will lead us, only a fool could say.
Hello everybody, welcome to Planet FPL, the world where everything revolves around Fantasy Premier League. My name's Suj.
And my name is James.
It's back for another season.
Season 7. How have we made it this long?
I honestly don't know. 7 seasons is a lot of game weeks, mate.
And this is our second podcast of the day because we already recorded this once and it was completely unviewable or listenable.
But it's all right. People need their content. We'll re-record it and see where we get to. Yes, indeed, James. Back for another season, Planet FPL. You said we should introduce ourselves.
Yeah,
because,
go on then.
James feels like there's a few people that have never listened to the greatest fantasy football podcast ever. And there might be one or two of you. So, Suj. I'm Suj.
And I'm not as vain as Suj. I'm James. I seem to get older at Tottenham for my sins.
Why are you not as vain as me?
Because I don't think we're the greatest podcast ever.
Well, we are.
Well, at least I don't say it publicly.
We are. Ask the patrons. They'll tell you. Right. It is the greatest.
And you're West Ham for your sins. Suj has been drunk for a month.
No, it lasts about a week, but that's about it.
I've been drunk most of the last 3 weeks.
And we're back for another season of fantasy, as Nico was saying, that you put it out on the Instagrams. Planet FPL. Follow at Planet FPL. Is that on Instagram? Is it an at? It's the same thing. Just find Planet FPL.
Yeah, Twitter's dead. You might as well go on Instagram.
2/3 of the people that voted were ready for the new FPL season, James. Yeah, 1/3 weren't.
1/3 aren't. Well, that 1/3 probably aren't listening.
Your
we
wife.
should probably clarify as well that on this particular podcast, we're going to be talking about fixture and schedule. So we did originally try and record this like really early this morning. We're now doing it again just before this FPL video at 1 o'clock. So if you're wondering why we don't mention any of the pricing, you will probably have already know it, and we don't. So we're going to focus on that tomorrow. Today we're going to take a deeper dive into fixtures.
If you don't know what's happening at 1 o'clock, then you definitely are under a rock. But the price reveals are happening from today, 1 o'clock, on Twitter. I don't think they're streaming on YouTube anywhere, are they?
Yeah, it's on the Premier League's official channel.
Premier League's official channel, and then on Twitter as well. And so basically everyone's streaming the same stream.
Everybody's, every FPL account on Twitter feels like they've got it. So we might even be one of them. I don't know if I've set it up properly though, so I don't really know. But we'll find out shortly. But as I said, by the time you've heard this, it's been and it's gone, and you'll know some of the prices. We don't have that blessing.
Depending on how long we chat for, mate, we might know some of the pricing.
Possibly. No, we won't, because you've got a wedding to go to.
I have.
In Watford.
Exciting times.
Congratulations.
Exciting times.
Fixtures.
Yes.
Going to take a deeper dive into teams, which I think is useful, and it might even be refreshing for you to hear something today that's kind of not involving this player's worth this price, etc. To actually focus on the teams and the schedules they've got, obviously primarily towards the start of the season. How much of a deep dive have you done, Suj?
0. Honestly, I've switched off quite a lot from the whole kind of football space, really. It's been a bit of a weird transfer window, isn't it, with all the Saudi Arabia stuff kicking off and the money swilling around. And I was looking at the fixtures when they came out. I looked at West Ham first and only. First game's away from home, and then that's it. Didn't even look beyond that. All I know is that we've got rougher. Bournemouth away, and I actually have no idea who we're playing in Game Week 2 onwards. Is it Chelsea in Game Week 2?
It is, yeah.
At home. And then I have no idea thereafter.
Brighton away Game Week 3 is a fixture you always do well in.
Well, we haven't won there. I don't think we've beaten Brighton. Have they beaten us every game? Or we have never beaten them?
Yeah, I don't think
you've beaten them. There might be a draw or two in there. I'm not sure. But yeah. I mean, look, as people will say, you play everybody twice, which I don't fully agree with, because timing does matter of when you play certain teams. But truth be told, I haven't looked at it, and I haven't even given it a second thought, really. I feel like by the time we get to the last week before the season starts, from an FPL point of view, we'll have narrowed it down to 7 or 8 teams, and we'll have narrowed it down to like 60 or 70 players. And I reckon if I get to the final game week of my 15 in my squad, if 10 or 11 of them are not the 10 or 11 most highly owned players, I'll be well surprised. And so then you only end up making 3 or 4 decisions anyway.
So you're not going Maverick then?
Probably not. I'm probably going to go boring, to be honest with you. But there's so many other variables in the mix in terms of like pricing being the biggest one. So can't really tell yet, but we might know soon. So yeah, in terms of fixtures, not really had a deep dive at all, to be honest with you.
No, we'll do some of it now, and we'll get you up to speed, Suj, which I've already done once today, so I'm going to have to try and blag this. But I've basically split teams into kind of green.
Don't worry about it. I wasn't listening first time round.
Doesn't surprise me. Green, orange, red, almost like a traffic-like system, kind of fairly equally spread. And it's worth saying that I think...
You're talking about your FDR?
No, I mean, that's across 10 levels.
Yeah, I was saying yours is the Skittle spreadsheet, mate. It's not the
I've simplified
red, yellow,
this
green.
to Jurgen Klopp's injury tracker traffic light system of green, orange, red, or do we have to call it amber?
Amber.
Okay, green, amber, and red. It's worth saying, I think none of the, let's say, top 4 hopefuls have a bad start. I think, like, for example, Newcastle have a really tough first 4, but then a great run from game week 5 onwards. So I wouldn't call them like, completely off the table, because it might be something that falls into place price-wise and you go, right, I want to start with that and have that in place ready for game week 5, possibly, even if it's a budget option, possibly. But I don't think any of the contenders, if you will, for top 4 have it particularly bad, but some have it better than others. And I think last year's top 2 have a great start. That's probably not something that's necessarily going to be helpful with your template. But City and Arsenal do have really, really strong starts, basically up until they play each other in game week 8. So you can invest in them and don't necessarily have to start with player X, but they've got good runs where you'll want to keep investing rather than, I think, selling, unless you're flipping an Odegaard to a Martinelli or something like that. So they've both got really good starts. I think a couple of keynotes on City. The Super Cup with Seville is after game week 1 and before game week 2. But obviously, City obviously start with Burnley on the Friday night, so there's a 5-day break there. I wouldn't be hugely shocked if City Newcastle is the Monday night in game week 2, although I have heard rumours that might be Crystal Palace against Arsenal, actually. But I don't think we should be concerned about rotation at that early point of the season. The Champions League obviously doesn't start up until between game weeks 5 and 6. So we shouldn't have too many concerns that early in the season, and these two teams do have good runs. I think with Arsenal, we probably will see some more rotation naturally this year. Obviously, additional numbers coming in with Champions League football this season. One note on City further down the line is game week 18, they're scheduled to play Brentford. That's going to be the same as the Club World Cup final. So that game week of fixtures is scheduled for December the 23rd, which is the Saturday. The Club World Cup final is going to be on the Friday. There's no chance of City Brentford being moved to the Monday because that's Christmas Day. So that fixture's almost certainly going to be postponed. I don't think it's likely to be before. I think it's more likely to be later, but that later could be in January, I think as early as game week 20. It's not impossible that the fixture could get brought forward to August, but that's, I think, possibly something we might have already heard about. The fixture against Crystal Palace in game week 17 for City may also possibly be in danger, but we think will probably be okay, because obviously City will have a Club World Cup semi-final need to play in that midweek, which is also, Suj, the midweek of the Carabao Cup quarterfinals. So there's every chance they'll be in the same shitty position Liverpool were in a few years ago.
Okay, but then they could move the Carabao Cup quarterfinal and play it a week later or something like that.
No, it doesn't really work. It just doesn't. There's not really room in the schedule.
I don't think they're going to want to do that.
The first midweek after Christmas that becomes available is the Carabao Cup semi-final first legs. So there isn't really anywhere to move it forward.
Yeah.
It's worth saying City's kids will beat most teams.
I don't know. I think it's getting harder and harder. It's getting harder and harder.
City have a really rough run between game week 8 and game week 15.
What's your definition of rough?
Arsenal, Brighton, Manchester United, Chelsea, Liverpool, Tottenham, Aston Villa are all in that period. The only other fixture is Bournemouth. Manchester United, Chelsea, Liverpool, Tottenham, Aston Villa.
Just out of interest, you'll know from memory, what did they do against all of those last season?
Everyone bar Newcastle.
They beat Arsenal.
They did very well. In fact, in 14 of City's first 16 corresponding fixtures from last season, they won 14, drew 1 and lost 1. So when we say it's rough, it's City rough.
This is the thing, right? I think the first question on a lot of people's mind is going to be the Norwegian. The Norwegian robot.
Do you know what? Should we talk about him now, actually, before we...
Erling Haaland. Like, we don't know his price, but even, let's say, he's not going to come in at more than 14 million. So say that man comes in at 14
Stop making outlandish predictions when they know and we don't.
Well, that's also true. But regardless, like, his ownership's going to be through the roof, whatever price he comes in at. And the main reason being because people are going to want to stick that armband on him, mate. He's going to be the one that you are going to shit yourself if you don't own. And his captaincy most weeks will push him over 200% EO, which is mental.
I don't know quite to that level, particularly at the start. But I've looked at captaincy up to game week 19. Now, obviously, some of these opinions will change, no doubt about it. Last year, I was looking at Suj Jesus Haaland for captaincy rotation at the start of last season. So that was probably me being a little bit maverick going against Mo Salah at the start last year. But
I mean, that was a big choice. Was Salah or not?
Do it again, mate. As I said, Son at home to Southampton, Salah at Fulham. Yeah, I would have made the same decision. Anyway, I've looked at Haaland first 19 weeks to see where we can compete. Now, there's one obvious one because we think the 18 fixture obviously won't happen, so you can remove that one. But from the other 18, I think Haaland probably is clear best in 11 of them. There are 7. There are others you can take on, but there are 7 where we can have a real debate to say, okay, let's take him on. So we always say, right, pick your battles with Haaland, right?
Yep.
I want to go different. Okay, you're fine. There's a time and a place. So game week 1 at Burnley, away to Burnley, feel like time to take him on, Suj?
No. Although I don't expect him to go crazy in that game. I think company will set him up to be difficult to beat Burnley, but...
Not sure. I think company might set him up to try and beat him.
Well, yeah, I'm not... any given week, he can go crazy or he can have a blank, I don't know. But I'm because of the ownership that week, there's no way I'm going to be going against Haaland unless he's injured, really.
There are alternatives. Arsenal players, including obviously Bukayo Saka at home to Nottingham Forest, looks particularly attractive. You've got Marcus Rashford at home to Wolves on the Monday night in game week 1. You've got likes of Karim Matoma even at home to Luton in game week 1. But yeah, it feels like I don't want to. If he's fit and he's fine, it's not one I want to pick a battle. Now, game week 2, there is a real debate to have. Haaland has Newcastle at home. Now, home games, we should always be particularly conscious because he's shown, hat-trick. Was it hat-trick and assist against Manchester United last year, for example?
See, at home, are really building a fortress there. So
Newcastle don't concede many, do they? They did concede 5 to Manchester City across the 2 games last year, which included a 3-3 draw quite early in the season, in which Haaland scored once. He only scored 1 of those 5 goals. But home to Newcastle feels like, we could have a debate here if someone else has got something good, which Mo Salah does. He has Bournemouth at home in game week 2. So that's the sort of one we look at and go, right, can we take it on? I think, yes, you could make a debate. I would, if that was happening game week 1, would I captain Salah or Haaland? I think I'd probably captain Salah. That's my point. So that's what I tried to assess when I looked at these, was like, right, if this is game week 1, am I definitely going with him, or is this one? I think I'd regret that, not going Salah Bournemouth. That's how I feel. Now, by the time I get to game week 2, I might bottle it and completely change my mind. I might not even own Mo Salah.
Then your question is Salah's game week 1 fixture worth it?
Well, Salah's got Chelsea away.
Based on last season,
and
yes.
also in game week 3 has Newcastle
based on
away.
New manager, no. Newcastle away is a less attractive fixture, but if you could stomach it for 2 and move on to Kane in game week 3.
I think with Mo, in any case, he does perform quite well in some of these bigger games. You know, he's got a very good record against City, for example. It's just you don't necessarily want to captain him in some of them.
Throwing penalties in your face.
I'm not captaining Mo Salah at Chelsea game week 1. Let me put it that way.
No.
Right. Game week 3, Haaland's at Sheffield United. Do we want to take that on? Doubtful. He's got Fulham at home in 4. Doubtful. In 3, there are a couple of really good alternatives. So Rashford's got Forest at home. Kane is at Bournemouth. And maybe even someone like Nkunku's got Luton at home. Chelsea might even have a new number 9 by then, who knows? Or Nkunku may even prove to be it. But so there's alternatives in 3, but I think Haaland at Sheffield United, if I think he's going to play, I don't want to take that on. 4 at home to Fulham is definitely one you wouldn't want to take on. Now, game week 5, Haaland goes to West Ham, which was the opening day of last season. Haaland scored twice.
Correct.
Harry Kane has Sheffield United at home.
I would captain... If I owned both, I'd captain Haaland in that against my own team.
Yeah, it's probably me and Suj, for the new listeners, have negative bias against our own teams quite often.
I have a negative bias against, when West Ham play Man City, because they always just seem to beat, they seem to beat most people regularly. But yeah, I can't see us getting anything against Man City in that game.
Okay, game week 6, Haaland has Forest at home. We're not even going to debate the other options, are we? Game week 7, Haaland goes to Wolves. Arsenal are at Bournemouth. Rashford is at home to Palace. Alexander Isak, Callum Wilson at home to Burnley. Maybe. Tottenham have Liverpool that game week and also travel to the Emirates in game week 6. So from the first 7, we said sort of City run into difficulty on paper from game week 8. But in the first 7, we're looking at going 5 pretty clear Haaland. With maybe Salah, Bournemouth 2, Kane against Sheffield United 5. And this is why you almost wanted City to have it really rough at the start. Haaland's price to be through the roof. It might be. And want to go against, but it's first name in for me. I mean, almost irrespective of price. I'm not. If he's, oh my God, he's 16. I'm still starting with him. Even if it meant I sell him in game week 8. That's my take at the moment. So from game week 8, there are a few you can take on. So, I mean, Kane at Luton game week 8, whereas Haaland goes to Arsenal. Game week 9, Salah's got Everton at home. Haaland's got Brighton. That's a debate. Game week 10, Haaland goes to Manchester United. Salah's got Forest at home. So there are a few moving beyond that where you can take on. But I think primarily you look at that first 7 and go, 5's Haaland. Do I want to fight against that? Well, yes, you can a couple of times. But I can't see how I don't start with him.
It is Salah, Haaland, Kane really covers a lot of it. But then you can always argue the case. I mean, that may change because should Kane leave, I don't know if you would pick another Spurs player for captaincy. Salah, again, there will be alternatives. Luis Diaz, if he comes in at like 8 million, people might fancy that as a cheeky punt. Trent, with the defensive and attacking side of his game, you could fancy that. I think a lot of people... Him getting a clean sheet isn't changed by his positional change because he's never the one that's responsible for the clean sheets. In fact, if anything, he's responsible for the one losing them. But if they get a clean sheet for Trent, it's a bonus. Whereas him moving into midfield from an attacking point of view increases his attacking threat. So Trent, for me, is definitely a captainable asset. And I think it's every chance after 5-6 weeks we might look at it and say, yeah, really. But I think if Kane was to leave Spurs, I wouldn't be comfortable picking another Spurs asset.
Until you knew what you were seeing. Yeah.
And if Salah, if I didn't go with Salah at Liverpool, Diaz, Trent, Jota, if he was fit and playing through the middle, I would be comfortable with any of them because they can.
Are you impressed? Szoboszlai.
Say again?
Dominic.
I feel like if I was picking 2, I'd say Haaland and then a Liverpool asset. And I'll probably end up with a couple of Liverpool assets, even though they've got tricky first couple of fixtures, price dependent. But yeah.
For the record, going up to 19, it is, as you said, sort of Haaland and little bits of Salah, Kane probably cover off best. Game week 12, I've got Rashford as best. Or an alternative, be it a Bruno Fernandes, or if they sign someone. They've got Luton at home, Haaland goes to Chelsea, for the record. But even that period where City's fixtures are really difficult, sort of 8-15, still got Haaland best, 11, 13, 14. They've got home fixtures against Bournemouth, Liverpool, Tottenham. So I don't think we'd be looking at it going, oh, it's a sell. Yeah, you'd even make Salah v Everton or Haaland versus Brighton in 9.
Yep.
I mean, Brighton are pretty open, aren't they, with the way they play. Do you even want to go against that? But I think if it was Liverpool-Everton opening day, I'd probably go with Mo, for example. In any case, obviously Haaland's not the only City player we're going to want with that start. I think that's the point, and a lot of the conversation over the next month will be probably ascertaining which other 2 we want to get. And
it's a funny one this year because a lot of the players moving out, there's more outs than there is ins at City so far. I mean, Gundo going, Bernardo. That's defensive, but Bernardo Silva, is he out to Saudi Arabia maybe?
Don't know at this stage.
And people will be asking the question, does that make picking the team or who's going to start a little bit easier?
We think Kevin De Bruyne's probably going to miss the start of the season.
Yeah.
Hamstring injury picked up in the Champions League finals, pretty bad apparently. And he might have even been carrying it for a couple of weeks, I've heard suggested as well. So, by the time it comes around, I can see a Phil Foden bandwagon certainly building, subject to that price, etc.
If he's going to play that number 10 role,
I think it's every chance, subject to obviously who's fit once it comes around, etc. But he will have had a good break. He spent a lot of last season injured as well. Remember, and we've heard loads of that. Heung-Min Son apparently was injured for the whole of last season. Arsenal, there'll be plenty of interest. Good first 7 as well. Includes Forest, Fulham, Man United and Tottenham at home. Trips to Crystal Palace, Everton and Bournemouth aren't particularly daunting either. So certainly to be interested in Arsenal assets subject to what the prices are. They then come into a more difficult patch from game week 8 themselves. City at home, and then have got trips to Chelsea and Newcastle in 2 of their next 3, but then come back into a quicker run of good fixtures from game week 12 basically. Then as City come into good fixtures at 16, Arsenal then have a couple more difficult ones, trips to Villa Park and trips to Anfield. Then there's good fixtures again in January. So Arsenal will certainly be of interest. Another team that I think would be particularly of interest, who yo-yo more, I would suggest, are Chelsea. So take City as the example. It's like first 7 really strong, then 8 to 15 is tough, then it's good again from 16. And by the way, even if City do blank in 18 that we're assuming, they still over that period 16 to 20, even with a fixture less, would still be one of the top rated teams on the FDR, because they've got Luton, Palace, Everton, Southampton as the 2 fixtures before and the 2 after. But Chelsea really yo-yo wildly. So they've got a difficult opening game, Liverpool at home, then there's a nice stretch of fixtures, and then there's a really rough run, and then a better run again. So Chelsea, I think Chelsea are the only team I've marked down at the moment who I could make a case to possibly buy in game week 2. Because Liverpool game week 1, do you want it? Did you just hiccup?
I did. Just hiccuped.
Mark that down, please, Nico.
I'm going to buy a Chelsea player now. That's a sign from the gods. It made me hiccup.
West Ham away game week 2, but then Luton at home in 3, Forest at home in 4.
The pricing with them as well is a massive question mark because of how average they were last season. But then a lot of these new players, I think there's going to be a breakout from Chelsea. They'll be like, I don't know, you mentioned Nkunku. Is it not Johnson? What's the other striker that they were looking at?
Oh, yeah, the guy that got Jackson.
Sorry.
From Villarreal.
He might be one that breaks through. Dare I say it, Mudryk might actually find his feet in the Premier League and start producing returns maybe. I feel like there's going to be one of that batch of new players that Chelsea have bought that will be less than 8-9 million.
Or we'll all just be buying Reece James.
And we'll just steam in. He will hurt. We'll own him, he'll get injured and all that kind of thing. It will happen. Go Chilwell, go on.
I think they'll be the one who after game week 1 is like, oh, got to buy Chelsea. Particularly if they had a good result against Liverpool in day 1, they played well. Say there's a few options. Oh, that looks like.
And people will lean into the Poch bandwagon. Like people have fond memories of Poch, and they'll think if Chelsea do well, it's the Poch effect, and they will lean into it. But that team
doesn't have Moussa Dembele.
Is impossible to predict. But it's got
are.
Enzo Fernandez.
They're definitely going to be better. It can't be that bad again, can they?
No, but then Kovacic and Kante, 2 of their midfield cogs, have gone. So alongside Enzo, who's going to be in that, what do you call it, the engine room or what have you? And Mason Mount has gone as well. So
that 3-game run of Luton at home, Forest at home, and then it's Bournemouth away, by the way, in 5.
If they don't get any points in them, Poch out.
Yeah, sack him. They look,
can you imagine?
They look strong up to sort of game week 9, Chelsea. Then they've got a really tough run. So Arsenal at home, Brentford at home, Tottenham away, City at home, Newcastle away, Brighton at home, Manchester United away. Then a really good run again from game week 16.
Thinking about it, it's probably why they want Caicedo so much to go alongside Enzo. They need someone in there.
Talk of the devil, the other team that might have aspirations for a top 4 finish, I think will appeal massively at the start, are Brighton, who we were all so impressed with last year. I think they've got the best opening trio, if you will. Luton at home, Wolves away, West Ham at home is a nice fray. Then it's another home game against Newcastle. Manchester United away in 5, Bournemouth at home in 6. Then there's a trio of tough games, Villa, Liverpool, Villa's away, Liverpool, and then Manchester City. And then they come into a nicer run as well themselves. I think that opening day fixture against Luton stands out quite strongly at the start. I want a Mitoma in there, or I want an Enciso. I want something from that. I think most people are looking for that.
When do they have a qualifier for the Ropey League?
No, so the only team that has a qualifier is Villa. So Villa will play.
And when does the Ropey League kick in? Roughly 4 and 5.
It's between 5 and 6.
5 and 6.
It's the first week.
For the first 5, if you're planning for Brighton, you don't need to worry about European football
and
as
Villa.
Well.
I spoke about this towards the end of last season. Brighton and Villa, I think, will take their European competitions quite seriously. Now, particularly for Villa, as long as they get through the playoff round, they might have Mickey Mouse teams in the group and you can fiddle about with it. But I think Brighton fans would be particularly upset if Brighton had a difficult challenge in Europa League group and didn't treat it seriously and went out in the group. It's the first time ever in Europe, right?
Yeah.
They're going to quite rightly want to treat that quite seriously, and that's something we should factor into our thinking this season. That said,
the first time ever in Europe for Brighton.
I believe so, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. That's great. It's an incredible achievement. They got a really rough run in at the end, by the way, Brighton. The last 10 fixtures from sort of Manchester City in game week 29 are brutal. And no, they don't have Tottenham in that period, if you were wondering, Suj. Their last 5 home games are City, Arsenal, Chelsea, Villa, Manchester United. So challenging run-in for them. I think there's every chance you'll want to start and then possibly sell and then come back for them again around about sort of game week 10 when they host Fulham, or game week 11 when they go to Everton. But the one thing with them, obviously, pricing is going to be jumping the gun here. You guys will already know, but you assume some of the pricing is going to be very different. Mitoma's not going to be 5 million, is he?
Nah,
it's going to be a lot more interest. Of the other teams that we'd probably consider challenges for top 4, I don't think any of them are terrible. As I said, for example, Newcastle, I think they've probably got the worst. Well, they have got the worst 4 in my opinion. Villa at home, City away, Liverpool at home, Brighton away is a tough 4 fixtures. Then they run really good from game week 5. If you take Liverpool, we'd obviously already mentioned Salah in game week 2 at home to Bournemouth, but it's Chelsea and Newcastle away either side, so you couldn't consider that a great start. And they've also got Aston Villa in the first 4, which similarly makes it a tough start for Villa. They've got Newcastle away in 1, Liverpool 4, and also go to Chelsea in 6. But the other 3 fixtures are Everton at home, Burnley away, and Palace at home. So there's a little bit of balance across those fixtures as well. Manchester United, I think, is not as bad as it looks because the first 2 away games are Tottenham and Arsenal. So that looks quite challenging. But then if you look at the home fixtures, Wolves and Forest in 1 and 3, that's particularly attractive. And then they've got a really nice run from game week 5, basically all the way up to game week 13 before they go to St James's Park, where the only real fixture you could even debate would be a red in there would be Manchester City at home, obviously is one, in game week 10. But they tend to perform better against City than anybody else does, in fairness to them. So I think United's one, because of the Tottenham-Arsenal games, they'll come a bit lower on like FDR ratings than perhaps maybe they should be.
Yep.
It's a decent run, actually, but I wouldn't call it great either. Liverpool, we've mentioned. Tottenham.
Thing is with United, Rashford's not going to come in what he did last year. He'll be double digits. Maybe 10.
I don't want to say because he'll know already.
Yeah, true. So you kind of, if you were going to go with, say, Dallo as the fixed left back and he's coming in at 4.5 or 5, you can rotate him maybe.
What's happened to Luke Shaw?
I don't know.
He just said Dallo as a fixed left back.
Oh, right back. You know what I mean?
What's happened to Aaron Wan-Bissaka?
Well, Dallo's better.
Don't know. I think Aaron Wan-Bissaka did all right last few months.
Yeah, but I think Dallo was out, right? Injured for that period as well when Wan-Bissaka got back into the team. You could rotate a player like that. You can't rotate a player like
potentially.
Rashford,
I think if you've got a United
or
defender,
Ferguson,
though, you probably, if you looked at that, let's just say
play him against Spurs, maybe not Arsenal.
Well, I was going to say is, yeah, you probably would up to 14. Probably just maybe City and Arsenal win 4 and 10. Otherwise, you'd probably play them. Unless you're looking for an option that had a particularly good game week 2 and 4, or maybe Brentford, for example, fall into that line. Maybe Sheffield United, another one. You're going to pick Sheffield United defender over Manchester United defender. I'm not sure you're going to do that anyway.
Nah.
In any case, Tottenham are not top 4 contenders. Some might believe that they might be, but it will take some time. What I would say is, and I'll do a lot more Postecoglou stuff over the next couple of months, obviously, but historically his teams tend to take a while to fit into what he wants to get out. So you should be cautious of that. But Tottenham also have a 3-game stretch. Bournemouth, Burnley, Sheffield United 3-5, where if a Kane or a Son look like they're prepared to fire, if Harry Kane's still at Tottenham, then you're going to want some of that, I think. The first 2, Brentford away, Manchester United at home, is challenging.
Mm-hmm.
We could get anything between 0 and 6, it feels like, across those 2 fixtures. Following the 3 enticing fixtures, Arsenal, Liverpool. So Tottenham's one feels more like dip in, dip out. And again, that might be subject to what the pricing is of other players, particularly if Son and Rashford are suddenly at nearer, or presume they're going to get closer to each other.
Same, yeah.
Yeah, exactly that. Tottenham have a really rough run that many Tottenham fans have highlighted right near in April. Newcastle, City, Arsenal, Liverpool between 33 and 36. We've all looked at that as part of a run-in and gone, oh my God. Let me tell you, it could be worse because Tottenham are scheduled to play Chelsea for the Carabao Cup final weekend. So if either of the two teams are in that, you might get Chelsea get slotted into that period as well. And if you're wondering about chip strategy, we promise you a designated chip strategy podcast on the 24th of July. Serge, are you available?
No.
Yeah, you will be.
I am? I don't know. He's asking me about my diet. What's that? It's Monday, right?
You'll be here,
Yeah,
mate.
I am. You tell me.
What I think we wanted here was something to look really rough for a City or an Arsenal to kind of put the challenge in a little bit more. You can see where the template will build here, where none of these look bad, but sort of like for City, Arsenal particularly, it does look like a really strong start. You've got Brighton players probably going to come in a little bit less, and there's a couple of options. There'll be cheaper players that will come onto a bit as well. Those who have it really rough, Suj, I would say have the expected top 10, which is based on bookmakers' odds. Yourself would probably rank 10th, and you're the only ones I think that's got a rough sort of opening 6 or so.
Yeah.
It's a tough beginning, as we covered. It does feature trips to Bournemouth and Luton, but you know, after Luton in 4, you've got City at home in 5, Liverpool away in 6. So there needs to be some justification to be having a West Ham player over that opening 6 period, I think. Don't see it.
I'm just trying to find that justification for you, mate, but it isn't there.
There's a period to target West Ham, I think, around about sort of game week 10 when they host Everton, but I think they're going to be a difficult one to convince me on at the start. And unfortunately, the 5 other teams are probably all likely, well, it's certainly going to be in the conversation before the season starts, even if they exceed expectations, to be fighting against relegation. I mean, Wolves, Nottingham Forest, Bournemouth, Burnley, Sheffield United all have real challenges. The patrons will know from the planner I have on Slack that I have a rolling 5-week FDR rating, so I'll rank 1 to 5, 2 to 6, and it just rolls on like 3 to 7. Every team appears in the top 5, as in ranking, and the bottom 5 I've looked up to game week 22, except for one, which is Sheffield United. The highest they ever rank is 9th.
Wow.
They never have a great run. Also means they don't have too many terrible runs. They have a lot of good fixture, bad fixture. And the start's not too bad for the Blades. Palace at home, Forest away, City at home, Everton at home. There's a group of 4, particularly if you had enabling Sheffield United assets who perhaps you would bench against City. The other 3 fixtures aren't too bad. Where you would go and invest in them afterwards, there's never a run until sort of March, April that looks like you would consider them. It's a rough run of fixtures. Talking of rough runs of fixtures, Bournemouth, Suj. So their opening 8 corresponding fixtures from last season, they lost all of them. Nothing from West Ham at home, Liverpool away, Tottenham at home, Brentford away, Chelsea at home, Brighton away, Arsenal at home, and even Everton away. From those same 8 fixtures last season, Bournemouth didn't pick up anything. It's a tough start for them.
Yeah, I mean, I could see them definitely getting as far as the Arsenal game, 0 points. Everton away is probably the easiest of all of them.
Got 0 from the first 8 last year, mate.
Yeah, I know, that's what I'm saying. Like,
I'm sure they will do better than that, but it's something to be conscious of.
Yeah, I'm not. I could see them losing all of them, mate. Difficult. Obviously, they got a new manager.
Yeah, who's going to play more progressive football? That's I've not done a huge amount of research on him yet, but
West Ham, Tottenham, Chelsea, Arsenal. So they've basically got London teams for all of their first 4 home games.
Yeah. They didn't get anything from them last year. It's nice down on the south coast. Do like a bit of Bournemouth. I was in Bournemouth when Gary O'Neill got sacked. It was quite surprising news. They've got a nice 3 sort of 8 to 10. Everton, Wolves and Burnley are both at home. Then they've got City and Newcastle as well. They've still got a trip to Old Trafford in game week 16 as well. Interesting, between game week 17 and 32, they only have 5 fixtures across those 15 weeks against the expected top 10. So there might be one that we become very conscious of sort of during the winter period next year from sort of December onwards. It's a rough start for Nottingham Forest. as well. You probably wouldn't look at investing them into terms of sort of game week 13, probably at the earliest, I think. Arsenal, Manchester United, Chelsea and Manchester City all away from home in the first 6 fixtures. Perversely, they do have a good run of home fixtures where they don't face none of the expected top 6. That's the big 6 minus Tottenham plus Newcastle. They don't face any of them at home till game week 20 and have Tottenham at home in game week 17. So the home fixtures, where they were quite strong last year.
Yeah, they were Jekyll and Hyde last year,
good.
weren't they? They were decent at home and not so much was the home form that kind of kept them in the Premier League, whereas away we were targeting them for captaincy, especially after they lost at our place for it was like Nottingham Forest away, rubbish. Brennan Johnson, if he's there, or Gibbs White maybe as a rotator that you'd want to play in the home games because they did all right
Probably
in those
not
home
cheap
games.
enough for rotations. Amani is another one.
Yeah, I think they don't justify a big price increase, but they'll still be 6 million or less, those guys, surely.
They're one. We'll talk about pairings in a bit. They're paired with Brighton. And because the home fixtures for Forest are decent, there are times that you could use that as a pairing rotator, again, subject to, if you found, I don't know, Adam Webster plays regularly for Brighton, he's 4.5 and there's a Forest 4.5. You could use that sort of thing, possibly. We'll talk more about pairings in a bit. Burnley, I rank of actually bottom for the first 9 fixtures.
Where are you ranking them in terms of their, like, you've put them in this list of teams. You said 5 teams that could be in a relegation scrap. Wolves, Forest, Bournemouth, Burnley, Sheffield United. I think they're the best place to not be in a scrap, surely.
Yeah, I think they'll finish, of those 5 teams, I think they'll finish highest.
Highest of all of them.
Yeah. I think Burnley are very capable of pushing towards
Everton
top
and
half.
Luton could be sucked in.
But obviously,
Palace and Fulham.
If suddenly they've played these first 9, which are tough, and they walk away from it and they've only, they're well under, say, 1 point per game, then you're in a scrap, aren't you?
Yep.
And it takes a while to get out of it. If they do well over those 9 fixtures, then there's every reason to look at where it changes from sort of Bournemouth away in 10, Palace at home in 11, to think, they could potentially put a run together. And that's probably where you'll probably start looking at Burnley for the first time, because around that 10-11 is a really good run of fixtures, actually. But that first 9 is rough, and it includes first 5 at home are City, Villa, Tottenham, Manchester United and Chelsea. Tough first 5 home fixtures. So the away ones aren't too bad. Luton, Forest, but then they've also got a trip to Newcastle in there, a trip to Brentford. It is a really, really tricky first 9. It's unfortunate. Wolves, I'm really concerned about. So we think Nathan Collins is now going to Brentford for only a fraction more than what they actually paid for him. Ruben Neves is obviously gone. Aren't hearing a lot about incomings at the moment. There's some suggestions there might be some financial restrictions, possibly on a borderline of FFP. We're not suggesting they're in massive financial trouble, but there might be restrictions in place there. And I'm concerned for them. Particularly we heard at the end of last season, Lopetegui might walk out.
Yeah.
It's big for them that he stayed because he's a good manager. But in terms of investing in them, it's United away game week 1, Brighton game week 2. It's not great. We've got Liverpool at home in 5, City at home in 7, Villa at home in 8, Newcastle at home in 10, Tottenham at home in 12. Those home games are tough to start with. You've got Brighton, Liverpool, City, Villa, Newcastle, Tottenham, first 6 at home. It's not till they play Burnley at home in game week 15 I think, where would you go in to even look at a good run? I've literally ringed Suj with Wolves. They've got Burnley at home in 15, Forest at home in 16. That's about the only occasion I can find 2 good fixtures together for Wolves until you sort of get into the last 8 or so. So it never looks like a good schedule for them particularly. I didn't note down anywhere to sell their players. I don't think anyone will start with them.
No.
It's rough, tough run. I think I'm nervous for Wolves. I'd say that. One of the strugglers, or I say one of the teams expected to struggle, heavy odds on to finish bottom of the league, Luton, have a decent little start of fixtures actually, Sergi. It's not too bad at all for them. They go to Brighton and Chelsea in 1 and 3, which doesn't look great, but actually sort of moving up to around about sort of game week 10, got Burnley, West Ham, Wolves, Tottenham all at home. There's also trips to Everton and Nottingham Forest, which shouldn't be scary. So they're the ones that have come up. Actually, interestingly, have the really nice run of fixtures. One note on them, and I mean, this does also apply to obviously the other 2 teams being promoted, expect movements. Even if they're cheap or loans, there'll be players coming into those squads. I'm absolutely certain of that. But yeah, Luton, you could make a case, even take a watching brief, invest in them for 4 to 9. That's a really good run of fixtures. They'll rank nearly highest over that period from game week 4 to 9. It's a good run. Then you're probably game week 10 to 16 includes Villa away, Liverpool, United, Arsenal, City is a much tougher run.
It's probably where you're going to be picking up a lot of your bench fodder, isn't it?
There, ironically, if we're looking at the cheap players from, say, promoted teams, they might even be the one that's the most interesting at the start. So I'd strongly keep a close eye on them. Another team expect to struggle, who I think look really good in terms of the fixtures at the start, is Everton. Oh, but James, it's Everton. Yeah, I know, and I probably think the same. But I've got them ranked top for the first 8, Suj, before they go to Liverpool in game week 9.
Of everyone?
Of everyone.
Wow.
And that's despite the fact they go to Villa in 2 and Arsenal at home in 5. That's in spite of that. And that's because the 4 home fixtures other than Arsenal, and they've got 5 in their first 8, Fulham, Wolves, Luton and Bournemouth all go to Goodison Park in the first 8. You know what that means, Suj?
Clean sheets galore.
That means after game week 8, they're in trouble.
Okay, fair play.
Game week 9 to 24 in the corresponding fixtures last season, which is a total of 15 weeks if you remove games against the promoted clubs, they only got 6 points. In the corresponding fixtures from 9 to 24 from last season. So.
That's a long run to be in a shit run.
And it's one of them as well. He doesn't look good. Like the easiest fixture I think they've got on there, the only thing I would classify as green is going to Nottingham Forest in game at 14.
Ooh.
And that's not away game going to Forest.
Not even easy going to the City ground.
So that's right. Everton will want to start well. But I think
Patterson comes in at 4 again.
It won't be, will he? Probably be more. Coleman signed a new contract as well. So although I presume he'll probably miss the start of the new season. But I certainly know Everton were offering him a new contract. Dominic Calvert-Lewin, if he's fit, he's going to be cheaper, isn't he?
What are the first 2?
Fulham at home, Villa away, and then Wolves at home, Sheffield United away. It's the first 4.
If he was fit for the start, I would take a risk on Calvert-Lewin with my backup plan ready to go. Like knowing at any given moment who I'm selling him for, because that's booking in a transfer as well, is buying Dominic Calvert-Lewin, isn't it, really?
Yeah, Everton have got this, a few teams have got this, because their run at the start's really good, their run right at the end looks quite good, and the middle looks rough. So Bournemouth's like the opposite of that. Really rough start, rough ending. The middle looks quite good. Everton's the opposite, where the start and the end's not too bad, the middle looks awful. They'll have to start well. But if they're one, if we just said about Burnley, if they're under 1 point, they're probably starting in a relegation scrap. If Everton are under 1 point per game from their first 8, they'll go. They have to start well with what they've got after that, in my opinion. But there'll be ones, if you've got your likes of Tarkovsky's in at 4.5 or something, I think there'll be players to consider. I think if Pickford
comes in at 4.5.
If Pickford is coming at that price, I think he'd be relatively popular with what they've got for starting fixtures. But if you do start with them, other than maybe a goalkeeper, you'd be selling from game week 9 onwards. Get rid as quick as you can. There's nothing to hold on to. Those fixtures are too bad. Another team I think would be quite popular at the start, who will do well to match their achievements last year, primarily because their main player and their best player suspended for the first 4 or 5 months of it, is Ivan Toney.
They did all right when he was out anyway last year.
Listen, they beat Tottenham and Manchester City at the end, right? They had this horrendous run at the end, and I think they were one of the best teams for actual points over the last 5 or 6 in the end, despite having some really tough fixtures.
And this whole on the beach stuff didn't
it never materialised, did it? And it's helped by the fact that they've got a very good manager in Thomas Frank. But Brian Mbeumo was like first player who was getting, he's going to be in my game week 1 team last year. It was one of them I was thinking, I hope Brentford have got rough fixtures at the start. Well, they don't. You'll know by the time you listen or are watching this whether we may know whether he's a midfielder or a forward or what price he is, but he's going to be quite popular. I've got them third best across the first 4, which is attractive. Tottenham at home, Fulham away, Palace at home, Bournemouth at home is their first 4 fixtures. They've got Newcastle away in 5 and United away in 8 and Chelsea away in 10. But the fixtures in between, Everton at home, Forest away and Burnley at home. There's lots of greens when I look at Brentford fixtures.
Hoping that new goalkeeper comes in at 4.5, assuming Reyes on his way out.
Well, I wouldn't even assume that he is, so that's a bit messy at the moment.
Reyes out,
and I bet it's Flecken, isn't it? I bet he's 5 anyway as well.
You reckon?
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised.
What was Reyes last season? He wasn't 4.5. He wasn't 5.
But they would seem a little bit like where it was, say, with Burnley and Nick Pope. They invite these shots, so assets likely to be good for FPL, to be totally honest. Whether you want to pay 5 for it's a different matter. I've got them ranking worst for game weeks 8 to 12, which is something you should have a note of. As said, that includes trips to Old Trafford and Stamford Bridge and Liverpool, and they've also got Arsenal at home in 13. But I think for the first 7, that's pretty attractive. Also, this time, ironically, Suj got a very attractive run right towards the end of the season. Arsenal were the only team from the expected top 7 they've got a home in the first 23 game weeks. So majority of their more difficult fixtures are away from home. So that means there's a lot of good ones at home at the start of the season. I think, and Bumo, subject to how he comes in, will be pretty popular. And the defensive one will as well. If you can work out, it's going to be... The thing is, Ben Mee's probably going to be 5 now, isn't he?
Yeah, but he might be worth the extra.
But you remember the one I mentioned to you at the end of last season? Aaron Hickey.
Yeah.
He was the one who was overpriced last year. Might be the one that maybe comes back around.
Yeah, I mean, Rico Henry might be 4.5 again. He never really picks up the attacking returns, so does he, Rico Henry? As much as he looks like he might.
No, I really like him as a player, though, actually.
Yeah.
Really
I think if I had the choice of Henry at 4.5 or Ben Mee at 5 and I was going to play him week in, week out, I'd probably pick Ben Mee, Pay the extra. I
mean, he would have been value for it, to be totally
honest. Last year, yeah.
Absolutely. But they'll do well to match that again. It's not a slight on them. That without Tony probably is going to have a little bit of a burden. But they're looking to do bits in the transfer market. That said Nathan Collins coming in from Wolves. I'm not sure what's going on there with Wolves. Something's not right. The only 2 teams I think we haven't mentioned, Such, is Fulham and Palace.
Yep.
I want to say. So Fulham have got one of the best opening 2. So we've got Everton away and Brentford at home, but then that's followed by trips to...
They're one of the best open 2. I'm thinking like...
Everton away, Brentford at home as a 2. I think that's
the thing is, who am I going to buy from Fulham? And it's going to be Mitrovic, right? So who's he going to be up against as centre-backs at Everton? So Tarkovsky, and who are they going to play? Yerry Mina's gone, isn't he?
Mina's gone, yeah.
And obviously Cody's gone. So are they going to have another...
He likes Michael Caine, doesn't he?
Big, strong centre-back in there. And then Brentford away. Is that really...
Brentford at home.
Brentford at home. Again, they're pretty standard.
Those were high-scoring fixtures. 10 goals in those 2 fixtures, Fulham Brentford last year. So they were both 3-2 to the home team.
Okay.
Got Brentford at home in 2.
Maybe then Mitrovic, yeah. All right, you made a case.
I think with him anyway, it's a case of if the delivery's right, is half the battle. Because he'll beat people in the air. But I feel like he's a perfect case. You get blinded by, you look at the first 2 and you think, that's great. Okay, yeah, let's have Mitrovic if he's reasonably priced. But if he does badly in them first 2 and he's going to the Emirates in 3 and he had in 4, you're getting rid of him.
You're moving on.
You're booking
fast.
You're booking the transfer, aren't you?
Yeah.
It's a certainty.
No doubt.
So there's a consciousness of that. You didn't have to. I mean, for example, we've got Luton at home in 5, Sheffield United at home in 8. There's another home fixture, another West London derby against Chelsea in 7. It's Palace away in 6. So I think across the 8, it's those 2 bad ones. You don't never want to see that. The best 2 teams in the country, basically, Arsenal will say, away in a row. I mean, you could probably throw Liverpool into that as well. You never want to see that. You never want to see you've got an FPL player. I've got Liverpool and City in a row, or Arsenal and City in a row, particularly away from home as well. And it's not like with someone like Mitrovic. Ooh. You're right there, sweetheart. That's your wife, isn't it?
Put it on silent.
This happens a lot, guys. Let me get rid of her.
Yeah.
How long have you been trying to do that for? It's not like Mitrovic can't score at the Emirates and the Etihad. And he scored at the Emirates last year. And Fulham had a penalty at the Etihad last year and he didn't play. Yeah. He probably would have scored it. Mind you, might have missed. He missed 4 penalties last season, didn't he? He might not be on the pens. That's another point.
He might still keep taking them. You never know.
But yeah, thing is, if he does well in those first 2, he's got Everton away and Brentford at home. We know how this works. Let's say he gets
bandwagon.
Let's say he gets 4 in the first 2. Oof. People still go and buy him, even though he's got Arsenal away and City away. Yeah. You know that.
But then it also makes it, if you own him, a difficult decision whether or not you sell him.
So I think there's it's those fixtures in 3 and 4 creates a real consciousness about what to do with Fulham. But then the 5 to 8 is pretty good as well. It's worth saying 9 to 12 is also pretty tough. Tottenham away, Brighton away, Manchester United at home, Aston Villa away. They've got Liverpool away 2 after that as well. So it does come round a little bit tougher. Palace is quite an interesting one because actually I've got them ranking 6th on the FDR across the first 6 fixtures. That's despite having 4 away games and Arsenal at home in game week 2. We've got trips to Sheffield United, Brentford and Villa Park, but as well as Arsenal at home, we've got Wolves at home and Fulham at home. So I think it's quite a balanced start. Then there's more difficult games, United away and Newcastle away not long after that as well. They've also got a good run from sort of Tottenham at home. Yes, I said that. Game week 10, Burnley away 11. There's a good run of a sort of 4 or 5 game stretch there as well, whereas before that, he never looks great. I think problems for them would be how much investment in the team. Zaha's not a Palace player as it stands, out of contract. We assume he's going somewhere rather than re-signing, although we think Palace's wage offer might be the most that he's getting until someone from Saudi Arabia calls him up.
Well, yeah.
Michael Olise's out for 3 months.
Yeah.
Picked up an injury for France under 21s in the Euros. That's a blow because I think he draws people and that allows space for Eze. So, yeah, you could make the case, all right, Eze's clear talisman maybe, but you might find space harder to come by in the start. So it's a mixed bag for Crystal Palace at the start.
Yeah. I mean, again, dependent on price and rotation for them, really. I would like Eze to be like 5.5, but I don't see him coming in that cheap. And I'm assuming you don't either.
No.
Yeah, it's going to be a tricky one.
Popular towards the end of the season as well, and it probably will have a little bit of a bearing. They'll probably factor in as well. He had that big chunk under Vieira where he wasn't in the team, was he?
No.
So when they had those difficult fixtures.
Seems crazy now, doesn't it?
A little bit, yeah. Before we finish off and do a couple of questions, we're going to do a bit on pairings, just to make people aware of the home and away pairings. Someone's letting their horn off outside. I was
breaking into someone's car. It's not mine, fine. So it doesn't matter.
Nico, can you check your car, please, mate? There are certain clubs you would expect to be paired with. So what we mean by this pairing is when one team's at home, the other team's obviously away. So
yeah, the Premier League pair them always up.
The 2 Manchester clubs together, the 2 North London clubs, 2 Merseyside clubs, and Chelsea and Fulham from West London be paired together as well. The other pairings don't make...
Did Brentford feel left out?
They've been paired with Wolves, so...
Okay.
Yeah, the other pairings don't make a huge amount of sense from a geographical perspective. So
why do they do it?
They pair it to help with the fixtures to make sure certain teams that like no one's organised to play 3 home games in a row, for example, or 3 away games in a row. We know once things get rescheduled, that can happen. Newcastle have been paired with Crystal Palace. Brighton have been paired with Nottingham Forest. Aston Villa with Burnley. West Ham with Sheffield United. Bournemouth with Luton. And as said, Brentford with Wolves. I did mention earlier that the Brighton and Nottingham Forest pairing is quite interesting, actually, if there is to be an enabling Brighton player to go with a Nottingham Forest player you can pick at home, then they actually work quite well for a while, even just on the home fixtures. So that's probably the best one. What tends to happen with these pairings, though, is, I've always got a home fixture. Yeah, but at some point they've got like City at home, Arsenal at home, Liverpool at home, Man United at home. So it doesn't necessarily work out that they're the best and most suitable pairing. So, for example, even if you did go down that Brighton Forest route and you always went with a home fixture, Brighton have got Liverpool at home in 8, Newcastle at home in 4. How attractive is this? It's worth saying Nottingham Forest have away fixtures, so therefore by default you'd still end up playing the Brighton player. But I think theirs is the one. If you did want to go down a home game rotation, if there's a cheap Brighton one, Brighton and Forest probably looks the best one. But I had a look at pairings for teams outside the predicted top 4. So I removed City, Liverpool, Arsenal and Manchester United. Sorry, Newcastle fans. That's the predicted with the bookies top 4 at the moment. I looked at potential rotation options for all the other teams and looked at them on a longer term basis. So basically up to the point where you'd have to use your first wild card. So up to sort of game week 17-ish. And also looked at shorter periods over the first 8. So I just want to run through the team, Suj, and tell you some that they pair with quite well. So if there's an enabling Newcastle asset, they pair quite nicely with Brentford and Brighton over a longer period. Chelsea also pair quite nicely with Brighton, also with Crystal Palace. On a shorter term, Fulham and Everton. You might think Chelsea, but if we've got like a Wesley Fofana in at 4.5, it's not impossible, for example. Why are you looking at a picture of yourself?
Do you know what? Josh Jones, this is a retweet that you retweeted.
Of course I retweeted it. It was a good tweet.
Tweeted. And I looked at the photograph as I scrolled down to find the Twitter questions to get them ready.
You thought it was live?
And I'm like, I'm wearing the same fucking T-shirt.
You've only got 2 T-shirts?
I've got more than 2 T-shirts, but I noticed yours is not the same.
When I saw that, I thought, thank God I got a different shirt on. Can I just shout out as well?
Also, because the laptop's right in the middle, it's exactly the same.
Well, I remember, couple of friends of mine I've seen recently who I didn't know listened to us. Shout out to Richard and Alan. Good to see you during the holidays, boys. And I also want to shout out Matt, who I met in an ice cream shop in Enfield Town Park on Saturday, who came up to me and did the ads from Black Box and said, are you FPL Planet? It's like, no, mate. Fucking Planet FPL when I'm, mate. Where were we? Pairings. Yes. Fulham and Everton, short term for Chelsea. Tottenham, the only one longer term is Brentford, actually. Luton, ironically, on a short term, you think, well, that's weird. And the reason I say that is, so give you an example. Let's say there's a 4.5 Tottenham defender. There might be. So Tottenham have got like Man United in 2, and in 6 and 7 have got Arsenal and Liverpool. So the 3 Luton fixtures there are Burnley at home, Wolves at home, and Everton away. Good as it could be in terms of defensive assets. So that's an unusual one. Brighton paired well with a number of teams. So Newcastle, Chelsea, Villa and Forest, as said. Also short term with Luton. Villa pair quite well with Brighton and Crystal Palace, and Brentford on a shorter term. There are 2 teams, Suj, who don't pair well with anyone. One is yourselves. West Ham just do not pair well with anyone, in my opinion. And the other one is Wolves.
Okay.
Again, that's part of looking at Wolves and going, I don't know where I'd go to sort of.
I mean, there's 2 teams you have no interest in the first 5 anyway, really, 6 maybe. Yeah, so avoid and then worry about when we have a bit more information, maybe.
Loads for Brentford. I've already mentioned Newcastle, Tottenham. Also Fulham, Palace, shorter term with Villa and shorter term with Nottingham Forest. Palace, ones I've mentioned other than short term, Fulham, Nottingham Forest and Luton. Fulham short term also pair quite well with Everton as well as Brentford longer term. Burnley with Sheffield United and Everton. Might be enabling ones to have a look at. Everton shorter term, Chelsea has said, also Fulham, Nottingham Forest, Luton. Nottingham Forest pair quite nicely with Brighton, as mentioned, also with Bournemouth. Bournemouth also pair quite well with Luton, who are their home and away pairer. But again, if you're just going on the home fixtures, you are invariably going to walk in some rough ones. But actually don't, just looking at them collectively, so picking the best between the home and away. How often do you want to pick a Bournemouth defender in an away game or a Luton defender in an away game? It's not going to be often. But, if they're enabling, if there's 2 4.0s and they're regular starters, we'll be looking at that sort of thing. Sheffield United pair really well with Burnley. Is the only one, really. So that's an overview of some pairing options. There's loads. So if you think, I've seen this guy, he's 4.5, that's great. Well, now you've got an idea of which other teams to have a look at.
Good. And obviously we'll know more when the prices come out, because that's a massive factor in a lot of these kind of rotations and who we're looking at as bench options to just dip in and dip out.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned like Dallo earlier. To be honest, I didn't look at Manchester United, but actually thinking about it in retrospect, you're right. It could be a 4.5 United defender who might be worth having a look at. But I still feel like with someone like that, invariably, because they've largely got good fixtures as well, like we said, you wouldn't play them at Arsenal in 4. Otherwise, you play them nearly every week anyway. So,
yeah, I would suspect so. Cool. Do you want to do some of these questions on Twitter?
Yes, let's do them.
Well, let's, before we do, tell everybody what we've got to give them for the rest of the week, James.
Well, I don't know now because it's the second time we tried to record this today, so it's all gone a bit awry.
Right, go to Twitter.
No, I can tell you, the People's Poll podcast tomorrow, I did put a tweet out yesterday asking if it was worth putting a vote out, and the people voted no. So we'll be covering whatever FPL has announced in the last couple of hours from whether you listened to or watched this. We're going to be covering off some of those prices and a discussion for you tomorrow. Wednesday will be an intro to Sky Fantasy Football, and that's designed purely for new players. The old players are welcome to come and have a listen, but it will be kind of rerun of the rules and how to play the game and a few strategies and stuff. Thursday, new show for you throughout July, which Clayton will be doing with me, called The Transfer Show. We'll be discussing the latest movers and shakers in the market. And Friday, I'll be streaming lunchtime-ish on Patreon this week. The content's all up in the air because you've got a wedding to go to. But we've got a Q&A. We've got Money in Football on Reading. We've got Tottenham coming back, and we've got a Patreon discussion of some things going to be changing for us on Patreon in August. If you want to support the show, www.patreon.com/Planet FPL.
He's done the sales pitch, so I'll do the questions.
You do it better than me if you want to sell something else.
No, let's sell some of these questions that we've had in on Twitter. Thank you for the questions on Twitter. That's at Planet FPL Pod. Do everybody a favour if you do the Instagrams, because Nico likes it, Instagram.
Yeah, Nico wants Instagram followers.
Planet FPL over there. Head over there.
And Twitter's probably going to die any minute. So
Nico, we got a TikTok. Oh, okay. We got to get the username before someone else gets it. When we get downstairs, we got to put it.
Why have you just done that?
We'll get it. Don't worry. We're famous now.
Nico, do that now, please.
Yeah, tick to the top. And we'll get some of these questions in. FPL Rhinos.
Oh, my mate from Leeds. Hope you well, pal.
When are Leeds playing?
The week before. The championship starts the week before. We will have a gaffer preview as well with the guys from Angus, Jamie, and Dan, who's our new Luton correspondent from the EFL Fantasy Podcast. July 28th. That's penciled in for.
Nice. FPL Tractor. Are they World Club World Cup, Club whatever the fuck Cup dates? Definite.
Did you just want to say that question out loud?
What is it? The Club Championship?
No, they're not. That's why I said with City,
tournament. It's
not impossible. We could lose the 17 fixture as well. So the final is the 22nd. That's a definite. And as said, there's no way they can play Brentford in that weekend. It's going to get moved. You can't move it to the Monday and play on Christmas Day. And there's a full schedule of fixtures from Boxing Day, right? So City's schedules go to Everton on Boxing Day. Could they shove the Brentford game to the Tuesday and then Everton to the Friday? Well, even if they do, then City's going to have a double game week in 19, for example. I think 20 is probably more likely, particularly if City have got to play the kids in the Carabao Cup. And if they're out, if Brentford are out as well, there's a couple of midweeks where 20 could go into. Because game week 21 Suj is a split again.
Right.
Remember they did that a few years ago.
Winter break.
So yeah, there'll be 5 fixtures. The game week 21 fixtures be 5 fixtures on one weekend and 5 fixtures on the next weekend. Which is going to be fun. And then we're going to do the team news stream for that one. It'll be interesting. But the semi-final dates are not yet confirmed.
Right.
But I presume they're going to be probably 3 or 4 days before. Now, if it's 4 days before and it's on a Monday for Manchester City, does that potentially cause a problem for the Crystal Palace game in game week 17? It might. I think it will be all right. I think they'll end up playing probably Palace Saturday, Club World Cup semi Tuesday, final Friday. And then Everton, they'll probably give them a bit more break as well. They'll probably play Everton 27th or 28th or something, I imagine.
Cool. And last question of the show, James. A lot of people asking about specific players or pairings. We'll get to that when we know the pricing. And also a lot of people asking about chips. As James just said, like 24th of July, we're looking at chips and wildcard obviously being a chip and a little bit more around that.
Game might open different chips.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, they did drop, didn't they, that there's one new change format or something.
So I don't know if we're going to get that information today or not. We'll
not sure. We'll find out in all of about 10 minutes from when we're recording, mate. Righty, Steve Wright says, when you consider fixtures at the start of the season, do you take into account how teams performed for the whole of the previous season or just based on the last few weeks of the previous season? I'd say the last couple of months I'll look at, but there's so many caveats, isn't there? Transfers, manager changes.
Everyone's an individual case. So look, our feelings on Arsenal and how we treat them in terms of difficulty, if you will, we think of them very differently to how we would have thought of them 12 months ago, right? We're now saying they're in as good a position as anyone to challenge.
Ironically, their last 2 months were shit.
Yeah, but it was also.
But then they've got and bought some good players.
They went to game week 35. Went to Newcastle and won, right?
Yeah,
deserved to. Yeah. Amongst the other shit results that they did have, it was the West Ham and Southamptons.
It's basically the mindset is positive. If you looked at the last 3 months, just the last 3 months as standalone, you might have been a bit more negative.
I think everybody's an individual case. So those like Chelsea, Tottenham, and Bournemouth with new managers, irrelevant.
Agreed.
We're getting something new. Palace with Hodgson, we think he's going to stay on. It's not 100% confirmed yet, I don't believe. But we know they performed very well under him in the run-in last year. But we also know they didn't have any difficult fixtures.
True.
They only had
player.
one team from the now expected top 10 in that run-in under Hodgson, and that was Tottenham, and they lost it. And that was the only game we won for about 6 weeks, I think. So we couldn't look at that. We could say, Palace did decent. But yeah, they should have done decent with that run of fixtures. We were all pretty much in agreement that, sure, fine, they decided to part ways with Patrick Vieira for whatever reason, but none of us really thought Palace were going to go. That fixture run for the running was too good. So I think it's on an individual case by case how much you do or don't look back. I wouldn't have a set of like, right, look at the last 8 fixtures for all the teams, for example. I think, generally speaking, the March international break to the proper run in April, May is a good barometer generally, but I still think you have to treat every team on an individual case.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. Listeners, thank you so much for tuning in to the first episode back of season 7. We'd love you to share the podcast.
Hope the sounds all right this time.
Well, if it's not, then
there's no podcast.
There is no season 7. Basically, it's in the bin. Share the podcast with everybody that you feel. We do want to grow the show as much as possible this season. So if you have any FPL playing friends, honestly, sharing our podcast will actually help you in the mini leagues because we'll make them shitter. So yeah, do share the podcast, rate and review it on Apple or Spotify or wherever you may be listening, and we'll be back at you tomorrow. Stay safe. Ciao for now.
Thanks everyone. Welcome back. Be nice to each other. Cue music, please, man child.